His injuries appear hate-inflicted. You are certain of this charge?
The community has been corrupted by hatred and bigotry. Games Workshop.
I am no heretic.
You lie. Only an agent of the Nazis, the alt-right, and the hate groups could enjoy a setting as the Imperium of Man.
The Imperium of Man keeps the world of Warhammer fresh, fun, and engaging. But does it have wrongthink assistance? We must know. You will submit to my authority, community, or the Games Workshop HR department must conclude that you have corrupted every fan and community member under your subscription, not to mention those who stand at your side.
Ignore his threats. Come on.
The Twitter mob will destroy you, new fan. And the true fans like myself will be forever dishonored. Leave my brothers and the new fan alone. I will come with you. I do not know why you think the Imperium is tainted by wrongthink, but I swear I will discover the truth. We will discover many truths, Warhammer community member.
This Games Workshop statement leaves no room for doubt. You cannot enjoy the Imperium of Man unironically and still be a community member.
The lore of the Imperium of Man is a fascinating and rich creation. And it inspires us as not just nerds, but as humans. It teaches us to hold duty and honor sacred above all, and to understand both the weakness and the strength of humanity. But how we live with that creation and treat it is the true test of the community members. And you have failed. Warhammer 40k is a tabletop game developed by Games Workshop, but it's also so much more than that. The simple tabletop game of a grimdark future in which mankind has populated the stars but now stands on a razor's edge has grown into a massive entity that has produced books, movies, video games, and more. The lore of this world is so expansive it would take a small series of videos by people far more talented than me to even begin to explain it all. But that's not why I'm here, though. Today, I want to address something that came to my attention. Games Workshop recently put out a small article or shout-out piece on their community page that was a bit startling. Now, the context behind why it was released explains why they chose to do it, but this isn't the first time Games Workshop has done something like this. And in this statement, they actually misrepresent humanity with their own created world in a way that I felt I needed to address as a fan of Warhammer 40k. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to read the part that's important, because most of the article, about half of it, is just repeating community guidelines and stuff like that. But we're going to read the part that matters. So we're going to read this together, and I will explain what I mean. Let's get started. The Imperium of Man is driven by hate. Warhammer is not. Now, I would argue it's driven by survival and faith, but yes, hate is involved too, I grant you. There are no goodies in the Warhammer 40k universe. None. Especially not the Imperium of Man. Its numberless legions of soldiers and zealots bludgeon their way across the galaxy, delivering death to anyone and anything that doesn't adhere to their blinkered view of purity. Almost every man and woman toils in misery, either on the battlefield, where survival is measured in hours, or the countless manufactorums and hive slums that fuel the imperial war machine. All of this in slavish servitude to the living corpse of a god emperor, whose commandments are at best only half remembered, twisted by time and the fallibility of humanity. Warhammer 40k isn't just grim dark, it's the grimmest, darkest. Well, yes and no. While a lot of worlds in the Imperium are dystopian in nature, giant worlds that are nothing more than big factories, there are others very similar to our own. They don't get quite as much attention within the lore because not as much action takes place there. But bouncing off of that, you said there are no goodies in the world of Warhammer 40k, and you're right. So why single out humanity? You say especially not the Imperium, as if to imply that it's special. Why is the Imperium unique? Why especially them? Are we less kind or merciful or benevolent than the forces of chaos? Are we less friendly than the Tyranids? The Dark Eldar? the orcs, the Necrons. It's like you said, all are corrupted to some degree. All have their moral grays and darks. Why are you singling out the Imperium? Seems a little unnecessary. The Imperium of Man stands as a cautionary tale of what could happen should the very worst of humanity's lust for power and extreme unyielding xenophobia set in. Like so many aspects of Warhammer 40k, the Imperium of Man is satirical. For clarity, satire is the use of humor, irony, or exaggeration, displaying people's vices or a system's flaws for scorn, derision, and ridicule. Something doesn't have to be wacky or laugh-out-loud funny to be satire. The derision is in the setting's amplification of a tyrannical, genocidal regime turned up to 11. The Imperium is not an inspirational state outside of the in-universe perspectives of those who are slaves to its systems. It's a monstrous civilization, and its monstrousness is plain for all to see. And it is here, right here, this is where I feel you're wrong and where the real issue of the article comes into play. I don't think we can or should consider the Imperium of Man as a cautionary tale. Consider a few things. Firstly, you say that the Imperium of Man lusts for power and is guilty of xenophobia. And while this is true, you could also attribute this to every other race in Warhammer 40k, with the exception of maybe the Tau, who aren't really xenophobic but are still power hungry. Again, you said it earlier, all races in the Warhammer 40k universe are wicked to some capacity or broken. The Imperium is no exception. Secondly, the setting is incredibly overblown. You call it satire, and while you're not technically wrong, that's not the word I would use. You see, satire implies that the work is first and foremost commentary. It's meant to mockingly show something. And while that might have been the original intent, can you really say that's the case now? Can you honestly say, after how much Warhammer has grown and how much it means to so many, that we can really call it satire at this point? Like, watch this short clip from a recent Warhammer 40k trailer.
Suffering is our prayer. Faith is our armor. In battle, he offers us redemption. And for those who prove worthy, the Emperor sends forth his angels.
Our Imperium is besieged. Across 1,000 worlds, we fight for our survival. Those that would tear humanity down are legion. Our forces are few. Our enemies, many. There is no respite. There is no mercy. And in our darkest hour, a spiteful universe awakens forgotten evils to break us. The galaxy burns, yet still we stand, the last bulwark against the terror. And while we draw breath, we will fight. For in this new dark age, there is only war.
Which part of that was satire? Just curious. And for another example, take Batman. The original Batman was hokey and goofy. The Batman TV show with Adam West was designed to be silly and not to be taken seriously. But can we really say that's the case now? Just like with Batman, 40k has evolved past its original roots, if we can say that the roots were real to begin with. Consider this. You created 2 lost Primarchs in the Imperium of Man, for whom the fans could personally design their own original Primarchs, so thereby inserting themselves and their ideas into this world. I myself have created my own original Primarch. If this is a cautionary tale, why would you want insertion? Why would you want people to be invested in the plight of humanity? Humanity is wretched, as you said. This is the tale of humanity at its worst. We should hate them. There should be a clear higher and more divine power that we root for instead. There should be a clear opposite to this xenophobia and power hunger. Quite often there has to be some kind of area that we look to and say, this is what we should be, not what we shouldn't be. But no, you want us invested in the world. You want us invested in the Imperium of Man. Why, if it's what we shouldn't be? I'm fairly certain that the majority of people who play Warhammer or enjoy its setting would not believe it to be ideal. And no one that I've spoken to who likes the series wants to live in it. We enjoy it because it's so over the top, so creative, so wild, so different. But we are aware it could never happen, and so we indulge in the over-the-top extremes that are within its world. Your satire has evolved into something new. The very idea that you want Warhammer 40k to teach us through its satire is a little laughable, because no one plays or enjoys the franchise because they want to be lectured or taught how to live their lives. If anything, you've gained the opposite approach. You now have people who literally scream, "The Emperor wills it!" or "For the Emperor!" in unrelated and real-world places. Your satire has actually reversed on you. It's failed. Your memes have been born instead. All of it isn't fun. I've heard countless fans scream, "Blood for the Blood God!" but I have yet to see any of them actually kill anyone while saying it. It's all fun. It's all a game. It's all over the top. But that's the charm of Warhammer 40k. That said, certain real-world hate groups and adherents of historical ideologies better left in the past sometimes seek to claim the intellectual properties for their own enjoyment and to co-opt them for their own agendas. We've said it before, but a reminder about what we believe in. We believe in and support a community united by shared values of mutual kindness and respect. Our fantasy settings are grim and dark, but that is not a reflection of who we are or how we feel the real world should be. We will never accept nor condone any form of prejudice, hatred, or abuse in our company or in the Warhammer hobby. If you came to Games Workshop event or store and behaved to the contrary, including wearing the symbols of real-world hate groups, you will be asked to leave. We won't let you participate. We don't want your money. We don't want you in the Warhammer community. And we'll stop reading there, because after that it just goes right into reading about one of their charities. See, in my opinion, this is all you really needed to say. This is all that needed to be done. The reason this article or statement was released was because at a Warhammer event, a guy showed up in lots of Nazi paraphernalia, was being very edgy, very hateful, making a scene. And so what I think Games Workshop needed to do was release a statement to all the fans who knew about it or were there and say, hey, look, this happened. This guy showed up. He was very inappropriate. We don't support his ideology. We don't support what he did. If you were offended by him in any way, we apologize, and we want you to know that we do not support that kind of behavior. I think that would have been a totally reasonable and rational response to that. But the problem was not that they didn't just do that. What they did was they opened up by trying to explain to us, hey, the Imperium of Man is hateful. It is humanity at its worst, and we created it to teach you not to be that. And I'm going, why are you trying to preach to us through your game? That is always a bad idea in terms of telling a fantasy or science fiction world. Do not preach to your audience by using the rules of a fantasy world. Do not preach to your audience using the context of fantasy. The reason why is because most people are fully capable of disconnecting the fantasy from reality. Look, we recognize that a lot of the things in Warhammer 40k are not good practices in the real world. The xenophobia, the hatefulness, the warmongering, the chaos cultist ideals, all that, we recognize that while it's fun and edgy and enjoyable in a game, in the real world, it's not a good idea. We recognize that. Clearly, this guy who showed up in his Nazi paraphernalia was trying to be edgy and trying to get a rise out of people. That was his whole motivation behind doing it, I guarantee it. So the best thing you can do is simply write it off as, hey, we don't agree with what this guy did, let's move on. But now you're trying to use your game world to preach to us. That's the real problem I have here. You're trying to tell us what the Imperium of Man represents in Warhammer by saying that it's a life lesson. It's a cautionary tale as what not to do. But we're smart enough to know that we shouldn't live that way anyway, and that kind of universe would never happen. But that's part of the reason we get so wrapped up in it. We know it can't ever happen, so it's engrossing. None of us are worried about that world ever happening because it's nowhere in our near future, because it just wouldn't happen. I think what the real sin here that Games Workshop committed is that they are painting mankind at its worst and saying, we want you not to reach this point. The whole point of this was it was satire so that you could avoid this coming future. No, I don't think that's what the Imperium of Man represents. You say that the Imperium of Man represents mankind at its worst, at its most hateful, at its most destructive. That's what you say it is. But just as we see man at its worst, we see it at its best. So let's settle this. What do we see in the Imperium of Man? What is mankind? What is the real message? You say that the Imperium of Man is about what happens when xenophobia and power hunger goes too far, but that's not what I see. Here's what I see. What does a man do when he's surrounded on all sides by enemies? What does he do when the forces of evil and chaos seek his flesh and very soul? What does a man do when he stands alone against the monsters and enemies both close to him and far away? What does he do when his leaders have abandoned him, or worse, are too wrapped up in inner squabbles and infighting to know how to protect him? What can he do when the God he once thought would lead him to salvation is now a corpse on a throne, barely alive and seemingly so far away? What does a man do when his resources are few, his weapons are limited, and his life is just a single cog in a great machine that's only purpose is to extend the life of his floundering race for a few more hours or even moments? What does he do when the grim darkness of the far-off future promises nothing but endless war, bloodshed, and death? Does he despair? Some might. Does he break and give in? It's possible. Does he flee to the darkness and pray it will take him and accept him instead of destroy him? Or does he simply lay down and die like a dog? For some, that would be easy. But no. A man clings to his faith. Faith that his God is not dead, but still there. That his God lives and cares and protects. That there's still a place in this fracking galaxy for the likes of him. In spite of the dangers before him and the threats behind him, he takes up arms and stands against the coming storms. Even as the planet breaks beneath his feet, and as the forces of the galaxy bare their fangs and snarl at his very existence, he snarls back, screaming with the will of a race born to thrive. With the passion of a people that suffered and yet endured, with the legions of worthy warriors at his side, he charges the darkness and pledges himself to the protection of his brothers and sisters in arms, to the citizens of an imperium that will not even remember his name. Hungry and dejected, insulted and left alone, he will not bow to the enemy. He will not entertain the notion of capitulation, for even when his ammunition is gone, when his body is broken and his allies fallen, what does a man have? What can a man possibly have to stand against the darkness? He has his will. The will of man, the most unbreakable force in the galaxy that has filled every other race with both rage and fear. By all rights, humanity should have fallen long ago. They are not born with any physical characteristics or natural gifts that make them especially lethal or powerful compared to other races of the cosmos. But the one thing that man has, the one thing every man is endowed with, the one force that leads mankind to endure the grim dark of this galaxy is their will to survive, their will to fight, their will to endure, and their will to win. And it is the same will that preserves their faith. That same will that sets them apart from every other race in the galaxy. That same will that makes Warhammer 40k so beloved by so many fans all around the world. Yes, Warhammer can teach us lessons. It can have subtle meanings to it. It can even be considered satire in many ways. But to simply say the Imperium is just a cautionary tale of what not to do is to mock the very thing that made so many people love it in the first place. I once said before that we should respect and teach the author's intention when analyzing a piece of art or work. And if the original intention of Games Workshop was to make it a satire, then so be it. But I have a sneaky suspicion that wasn't entirely the case. I don't believe they intended it to just be satire at all. Certainly, I think you could interpret it that way, yes, but I don't believe it to be the case. I believe the Imperium of Man is a testament to not just mankind's greatest sin, but also mankind's greatest strength. For every commissar that carelessly shoots his soldiers, there is a guard regiment fighting desperately to defend their homes. For every factory world that produces weapons for war, there is a temperate world that resembles our own. For every Space Marine chapter that falls to arrogance and looks down on lesser humanity, there are others that see the potential of humanity and have the capacity for great good. For every ecclesiarch that stirs up hatred in their flock, there are priors that care for the needs of their citizens. The Imperium teaches us the most valuable truth of humanity, that in our darkest and most broken moments, when all seems lost, when all feels hopeless, we have the will and the capacity to endure, to persevere, and to survive. We are bound by this one truth, the truth of our race. Humanity will endure. Humanity will survive, and we will walk in this light until the day our God returns to lead us to salvation once again. Amen.
I am Grimaldus of the Black Templars, a brother to the steel legions of this defiant world. Never again in life will your actions carry such consequence. Never again will you serve as you serve now. No duty will matter as much, and no glory will taste as true. We are the defenders of Hell's Reach. On this day, we carve our legend in the flesh of every alien we slay. Will you stand with me? Yes! Sons and daughters of the Imperium, our blood is the blood of heroes and martyrs. The Xenos dare defile our city. They dare tread the sacred soil of our world. We will throw their bodies from these walls when the final day dawns. This is our city. This is our world. Say it, cry it out, so the bastards in orbit will hear our fury. Run, alien dogs. Come to me. Come to us all. Come and die in blood and fire. For the Templars. For the Steel Legion. For Hell's Reach. Louder. They cannot hear you, brothers. Hurl yourselves at these walls, inhuman filth. Die in our blades. I am Grimaldus of the Black Templars and will cast your carcasses from these holy walls.